What if I told you that one of the most successful CIA rescue missions in history did not involve elite commandos, secret tunnels, or a dramatic firefight, but instead relied on one of the most unbelievable cover stories ever created? A fake Hollywood movie that allowed six trapped Americans to walk right out of one of the most hostile countries on Earth. It sounds like something invented by a screenwriter, but every major part of this story is real, and by the end of this video, you will understand why Operation Argo remains one of the most daring intelligence operations ever carried out, and why it became a symbol of American ingenuity and determination in the face of impossible odds. Before we begin, I want to know your opinion if you had to choose between being a CIA field officer operating in dangerous countries or an intelligence analyst working behind the scenes. Which one would you pick and why? Let me know in the comments, because this story proves that sometimes the people working in the shadows can change history just as much as the soldiers fighting on the battlefield. To understand how this mission began, we have to go back to November 4th, 1979, when Iran was in the middle of a revolution that had completely transformed the country. Massive anti-American demonstrations had erupted across Tehran, and the United States Embassy had become the main target of public anger. On that day, thousands of protesters stormed the embassy compound and overwhelmed its defenses, while American personnel desperately attempted to destroy classified documents and sensitive information before the attackers could get their hands on them. The situation rapidly descended into chaos, and 52 Americans were eventually captured and taken hostage, creating one of the biggest international crises of the 20th century. However, amid the confusion and panic, 6 American diplomats managed to escape through another exit and disappear into the city before the attackers realized they were missing. Their escape was only the beginning of a much more dangerous situation, because now they were stranded inside a country where they were among the most wanted people alive. For several terrifying days, the 6 diplomats moved between different locations, never knowing who they could trust or when someone might recognize them. Every knock on the door, every strange sound in the street, and every unexpected visitor carried the possibility of disaster. Eventually, they found refuge with Canadian diplomats, including Ambassador Ken Taylor, who made the courageous decision to hide the Americans inside Canadian residences despite the enormous risks involved. If Iranian authorities had discovered what the Canadians were doing, the consequences could have been severe, not only for the 6 Americans, but also for the Canadian diplomats themselves. Meanwhile, back in Washington, intelligence officials faced a nightmare scenario, because they knew that if the 6 Americans were discovered, they would almost certainly become hostages as well, further deepening an already humiliating crisis for the United States. The CIA desperately searched for solutions, but every proposal seemed impossible. Smuggling the diplomats across the border would require a dangerous journey through checkpoints and rough terrain. Flying a helicopter into Tehran would almost certainly attract attention and could end in disaster. Creating fake passports and simply hoping the group could board a plane seemed far too risky. As officials debated different possibilities, one man began developing an idea so unusual that many people initially thought it sounded ridiculous. That man was Tony Mendez, a CIA officer who specialized in disguises and exfiltration operations, and who had spent years finding creative ways to move people out of hostile countries. Mendez understood that conventional solutions were not going to work, and that the 6 Americans needed an entirely new identity. His idea was brilliantly simple and completely insane at the same time. What if the 6 diplomats were not diplomats at all? What if they were members of a Canadian film crew scouting locations for a science fiction movie? The more officials considered the proposal, the more sense it made. Hollywood productions often traveled to strange and exotic places, and people in the film industry were known for their unusual appearances and eccentric behavior. If the cover story was convincing enough, it could actually work. The CIA immediately began constructing one of the most elaborate deceptions in its history. A fake movie called Argo was created complete with scripts, promotional artwork, business cards, advertisements in entertainment magazines, and even an office in Hollywood. Anyone investigating the production would find evidence that it existed because, for all practical purposes, the CIA had built a real movie studio around a fictional film. With the cover story prepared, the most dangerous phase of the operation was about to begin. Tony Mendez flew into Tehran, carrying false identities and documents that could either save 6 lives or send 7 people into captivity. When he met the 6 diplomats and explained the plan, some of them could hardly believe what they were hearing. They had been expecting forged passports or a military rescue mission, not instructions on how to pretend to be movie producers and screenwriters. Yet, there were no better alternatives. For several days, Mendez trained the group, teaching them their new identities, helping them memorize details about the fake film, and preparing them to answer questions if they were stopped. Every small detail mattered, because a single mistake, a nervous reaction, or a contradictory answer could expose the entire operation. At the same time, the danger was increasing because Iranian authorities were beginning to suspect that not all American embassy personnel had been captured. Time was running out, and the CIA knew that if the search intensified, the 6 diplomats might never leave the country alive. On January 28, 1980, the mission entered its final stage. The 6 Americans dressed as members of a Canadian film crew and headed toward Tehran's airport, accompanied by Tony Mendez. The tension must have been almost unbearable because every checkpoint and every official they encountered represented another opportunity for the mission to fail. The group moved through security procedures, handed over documents, answered questions, and tried to appear completely normal, even though they all understood that discovery would likely end their freedom. The crucial moment came when Iranian officials examined their travel documents and identities. The fake story had to survive professional scrutiny under enormous pressure. Every member of the group remained calm and stayed in character. To their immense relief, the deception worked exactly as planned. The officials accepted the documents and saw nothing suspicious about a group of Canadians working in the movie industry. The Americans moved closer and closer to the departure gate, but nobody allowed themselves to celebrate because the danger was not OV.